Alien incidents have been reported for decades. My next guest, Thom Reed, says he encountered a UFO in the Berkshire Mountains back in '69. It's called the Reed incident, and it's the first UFO incident archived to be historically true.
Just miles away, as a child, Thomas Reed says he saw something quite unusual in 1969. Other people made reports as well. That paper trail, along with other documents, are now being compiled right here. Articles, testimony, results of a lie detector test, and even a drawing by then Great Barrington resident Thom Reed of what he saw.
This is hometown news, let's face it, and it's hometown history.
Deborah Opperman, director of the Great Barrington Historical Society, has been compiling the records. 14 years later, his father lost his life, and that's when the media started picking up the story.
Your incident was mentioned in the UN. You brought up the lawyer, Robert Bletchman. Well, while he was also your attorney, he helped organize a UN symposium on extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right. My father gave me a check for $500 back in the day to legally retain him. So I went to his office in Manchester, Connecticut, because my father still had aspirations and didn't want him to say too much. But our case went in support of the Hudson River Valley sightings because it was over water. Could something have carried over?
I'm Christina Arnold. I am a city councilor here in Roswell. I serve Ward 1, which is this Main Street area where the UFO Museum is and our UFO Festival is every year. Mr. Reed's attorney that came in and worked with us to actually make sure that that information was proper as it was presented to the other agencies that were going to document this story.
My ex-husband Frank Kessler and I own a law office. When I speak to Thom, his story doesn't change. I've tried to ask him several things, upside down, backwards, forwards, east to west, and his answers are always the same. He hasn't changed. It's the documents that several of them had gone before the UN or had been mentioned at the UN and were part of a symposium there.
So I think with the UFO Museum, working with the attorney, was able to get all the detailed information and just verify and validate exactly what happened with the Thom Reed incident, and then maybe able to seal it and have the magistrate sign off on it.
I understand that you know Thom Reed.
I do. He is actually a constituent of mine now. It's not unlike some of the other stories I've heard, except for the fact that the actual physical harm, if you will, that has been reported occurred to, I believe, him and his brother.
Hi, I'm Billy Baker for the Boston Globe, and I'm in Sheffield, Massachusetts, way out in the Berkshires. And behind me is the former Reed family farm. Here's the modern twist. Very recently, the Great Barrington Historical Society took a look at all the evidence, and they came out and said, we believe that this is true.
And then comes the whole idea of, well, how does one, how do you source something like that? What am I going to look at for primary source documents?
And then when you do meet Thom, and he's sincere, because I interview so many different people, and you can tell when they're real or when they're not. And he's telling his story, and you could tell he hasn't just created some P.T. Barnum sideshow tale of it. He has all the documentation, and I'm speaking to town officials, and it happened, and it's real. And you want to, especially as a journalist, you want to tell their story. What he said is he wanted to know what actually happened. He wasn't trying to sensationalize it. The notice from the Great Barrington Historical Society, when they were saying that he was inducted, it said for several reasons, because it had the Hynek classification.
Yeah, that's the other thing, Heather, is when I interviewed Tommy at the bridge for Ancient Aliens in 2019, I pushed him really hard. And the closer we got to the bridge, the more tense he got. And the closer we got to the spot where the car actually stopped, he got edgier and edgier and edgier. And, I knew I was trying to get this emotional reaction out of my buddy, one of my better friends. But because I will just tell you, I will testify. I'm not a psychology expert, but there's it was real. What happened to him is real, and it scared him, and it still scares him when he gets down there. And as I forced him to think about it and describe what had happened, you can just tell how genuine he is. So I'm with you. That's one of the reasons why Thom and I became friends, because I knew he wasn't BSing. So,
can you describe what you saw?
Yeah, it was like a orb, if you would, or a sphere. The car comes to a stop, and there's a feeling that came over the car, which was like some type of a field.
And we here at WSBS, I remember, were very, very active in covering this event. Back in my old hometown of New York City, and my father used to religiously tune into the Huntley-Brinkley Report on Channel 4, WNBC TV. And lo and behold, came a very interesting piece regarding an unidentified flying object being viewed up in Sheffield, Massachusetts. The whole event took place right where the current Thom Reed UFO Monument Park is standing right now, in that particular vicinity, off Route 7.
It's really neat that his family was the center hub, the diner there. I think it's just a great community kind of event, and I really like things like that.
I've been doing research on the Berkshires' involvement with the space program and the moon launches, and they're doing both GE and Sprague Electric, which was headquartered in North Adams. We're involved in the Apollo projects, but specifically Sprague was asked to make a silicon disc that is sitting now on the moon. It was left by the astronauts when they landed, and it carried messages from 74 heads of state from around the world.
The disc rests in an aluminum case on the moon's Sea of Tranquility.
I think when you have a lot of government-sponsored activity in an area, specifically that deals with like space, and this is where everything was being manufactured, made, and developed, that if there is a higher life form that is watching, looking for what we're doing, they're gonna watch here.
And that's what they were talking about putting together in your family's diner.
Right. And some people have said because of the 67 incident involving our family drove them to do it.
It was, well, they said that chip was manufactured in North Adams,
Right.
Massachusetts, and that's not that far.
No, it's what, 15 minutes up the road?
Yeah, and at that time period, how many diners were between that and where the other people were? So that was probably the place to go.
Yeah, and the horse track was down the road.
Back in February, News 10 ABC told you about a pretty unique story out of Massachusetts. A UFO encounter documented and taken down as history.
Now the man behind it is being honored with a special monument in Sheffield, Massachusetts. News 10 ABC's Heather Kovar has more.
It was 1969. Thom Reed was a child in the car with his family on this road. The story he tells is now marked with a monument.
It was definitely moving. It was lifting up this way. So whatever it was down in this area here and had come up. And my mother kept moving this way, and you could see the lights almost flickering through the trees. So the light started to bleed through the trees a little bit.
The car comes to a stop. Lights fill the station wagon. Silence, then a bang.
There was this eruption of like frogs and katydids and crickets.
I had recently acquired a little restaurant called the Village Green in the middle of Sheffield, which was kind of a place where a lot of people gathered and met. Now, as we started through the covered bridge, Thomas was in the back seat with Matthew, his younger brother. He loved those little, we call them fireballs, hot brown things, and he was going to give one to Matthew. There was a disc-shaped object hovering there. It looked something like if you ever took a turtle shell and turned it sideways and looked at it. It was like that, and then it was a little shorter under here, but in the middle there was a different ridge to it.